This is Rainy Night Horrors. Outside, the storm brews, and with it comes something darker. Every drop masks a sound, every shadow holds a shape. You're not imagining it. You're hearing the truth. Listen closely. It's already here. A muted resonance from the floor above stilled my hand, leaving it suspended over the television remote. Midnight had crept past, leaving me the sole conscious occupant of the house, or so the assumption went. The children I watched, young Leo and Clara, slumbered upstairs, surrendered to dreams hours ago, their parents not expected until the faint light of dawn. What, then, possessed the upper reaches of the house to issue such a sound? Silence rushed in as I thumbed the mute button, the sudden quiet amplifying the house's nocturnal murmurs. My hearing strained, sifting through the stillness. A protracted moment yielded nothing, just as logic began soothing my unease, convincing me of phantom noises. It returned, an undeniable concussion, closely followed by a dry, scuttling sound, like fingernails dragged across wood. A tremor started in my chest, my pulse quickening. Surely nothing, I reasoned. Old timbers groan, settle, conspire to deceive. Yet, a persistent whisper of doubt coiled in my thoughts. An intruder? Were the children vulnerable? With a difficult swallow, I rose from the plush sofa. A quick check, purely for reassurance. My gaze snagged on the gleaming knife block by the sink. A flicker of hesitation, then my fingers closed around the hilt of the largest blade. Precaution, wasn't it? Better than regret. Each step on the staircase was a betrayal, the wood lamenting my ascent with groans that seemed to boom in the pregnant hush. At the landing, I paused, listening intently. The scratching, clearer now, emanated unmistakably from the direction of the attic. First, the children. Peeking into their respective rooms, I found Leo burrowed under his covers, Clara curled peacefully, both oblivious to the knot tightening in my stomach. Relief warred with lingering apprehension. My focus shifted to the attic door anchoring the hallway's end. The scratching intensified as I neared, growing frantic, almost desperate. Sweat slicked my palm, loosening my grip on the knife handle. What was I thinking? Confronting the unknown armed with cutlery and a galloping heart. The police, that was the sensible path. But what if it was merely a displaced squirrel, a raccoon exploring forbidden territory? The potential embarrassment of a 911 call over woodland vermin felt acute, and abandoning the sleeping children while I waited outside felt unconscionable. Drawing a steadying breath, I reached for the attic doorknob. It yielded without resistance, turning smoothly, no lock to offer a convenient excuse for retreat. Slowly, deliberately, I pushed. Hinges shrieked a discordant welcome as the door swung inward, unveiling the Stygian gullet of the attic stairs. The scratching ceased abruptly. Silence descended once more, thick and heavy, broken only by the ragged sound of my own breathing echoing in my ears. "Hello?" My voice emerged, a thin, wavering thing. "Is anyone up there?" Only the profound quiet of the old house answered. My fingers fumbled along the wall, finding the light switch. A naked bulb sputtered erratically before casting a weak, jaundiced glow across a landscape of forgotten things. Boxes piled high, skeletal furniture draped in dust cloths, a labyrinth of shadows and potential concealments. Clutching the knife like a talisman, I began the climb. Each tread felt precarious, the ancient wood sighing beneath my weight. Reaching the top, my eyes swept the cluttered expanse, searching for any anomaly, any flicker of movement. Nothing seemed overtly disturbed, though my unfamiliarity with the space rendered judgment difficult. An interloper could lurk behind any neglected armoire, any teetering stack of cartons. "If there's someone here, you need to leave," I declared, striving for an authority I didn't feel. "The police have been called. They're on their way." A necessary fiction, I hoped. Still, silence reigned. Perhaps it was imagination, or the furtive scrabbling of mice within the walls. A wave of foolishness washed over me, though the unease lingered. Turning to descend, a peripheral flicker snagged my attention. I spun, knife extended defensively. There, nestled in the farthest corner, a mound of cardboard boxes quivered almost imperceptibly. My breath hitched. No mouse caused that. "I see you," I whispered, the sound barely escaping my lips. "Come out. Now." Slowly. An eternity seemed to pass in suspended silence. Then, astonishingly, the pile began to stir. Not a person emerging from behind it, but the boxes themselves, shifting, coalescing, rising into an improbable form. I stumbled back, colliding with the attic doorframe. Impossible. A dream, surely, or some waking nightmare. The entity assembled from the detritus fully revealed itself. It stood impossibly tall, a figure sculpted from corrugated cardboard and wound with packing tape. In place of a face, a crude visage stared back, two stark circles drawn in marker for eyes, a jagged slash suggesting a mouth. My own mouth opened, primed for a scream that wouldn't surface. The construct took a lurching, unnatural step forward. The knife slipped from my suddenly nerveless grasp, clattering onto the dusty floorboards. "No," I finally managed, the word thick in my throat. "You can't be real." The creature paused, tilting its misshapen head in a disturbingly inquisitive gesture. Then it spoke, the voice a dry rasp that seemed to emanate from the very air around me, chilling me to the bone. "Real enough," it whispered. "Real enough to be lonely." I blinked, processing the impossible words. "Lonely." The cardboard figure nodded, the movement accompanied by an alarming crinkling sound. "So long," it rasped. "Alone. Up here. Watching. Waiting. Wanting. A friend." My fear began an unexpected retreat, replaced by a profound sense of bewilderment. This thing, whatever it was, radiated not malice, but a strange pathos. What are you?" The question sprang forth, curiosity eclipsing caution. It shuffled its makeshift feet, a gesture oddly, unsettlingly human. "Don't know," it confessed. "Was something else. Once. Long ago. Now. Just this." A measure of tension eased within me. though I remained watchful. "How long have you been here?" "Many years," the raspy voice replied. "Families come, families go, never stay long, never see." An unexpected pang of sympathy resonated within me. The sheer isolation, hidden away for who knew how long. Why reveal yourself now? To me, the marker-drawn mouth seemed to quirk upwards, simulating a smile. "You," it stated simply. "Different. You listen. You heard." Before I could formulate a response, sounds drifted up from below. The distinct click of the front door opening, muffled voices calling out. The Davenports, home early. Panic surged, cold and immediate. How could this scene ever be explained? Madness? Hallucinogens? I turned back to the creature, intending to... what? Plead with it to vanish. But it was already receding, dissolving back into the jumble of boxes from which it had sprung. "Wait," I found myself saying, a sudden reluctance to let it disappear gripping me. It paused, its crudely drawn eyes somehow conveying a depth of feeling. "Thank you," it whispered, the sound barely audible. "For seeing, for listening, won't forget." And then it was gone, utterly assimilated into the attic's clutter. I stood frozen for a beat, the encounter echoing in the sudden normalcy of the house sounds below. Was it real? Had fatigue conjured a waking dream beside the flickering television? "Hello? Alara? You here?" Mrs. Davenport's voice, sharp and clear, jolted me back. Hastily retrieving the fallen knife, I hurried down the attic stairs, pulling the door firmly shut behind me. I met the homeowners in the hallway, forcing my features into what I hoped passed for a welcoming smile. "Hi, back already." Their event, they explained, concluded ahead of schedule. As I gathered my coat and bag, my gaze kept drifting involuntarily towards the closed attic door. It remained stubbornly ordinary, offering no hint of the extraordinary secret it now guarded. The drive home was a blur of reeling thoughts. One part of my mind desperately sought rational explanations, exhaustion, stress, a vivid hallucination, but another part, gaining conviction with each passing mile, knew the truth of it. The creature, real. A flicker of wonder sparked amidst the residual fear. How did such a thing come to exist? Were there others? And the most immediate question, what awaited me the next time I sat for Leo and Clara? One certainty emerged. My perception of piled boxes was irrevocably altered, and perhaps, just perhaps, the notion of volunteering to clear out that attic held a strange new appeal. Everyone, after all, needs connection, even sentient beings crafted from cardboard and loneliness. Pulling into my own driveway, the ghost of a smile touched my lips. Existence, I mused, held far more bizarre and beautiful possibilities than I had ever allowed myself to imagine, and I felt an unexpected eagerness to discover what other secrets lay hidden, patiently waiting for someone quiet enough to hear. The first time that jagged rasp echoed up from the basement, a cold certainty settled in Elias's gut. Wrong. It was the sound of resistance. Heavy iron dragged unwillingly over bare cement, a noise utterly alien to the Saturday afternoon stillness. He stood frozen mid-task, the silence amplifying his heartbeat, every nerve alight. He was, or should have been, utterly alone in the building. This husk of a commercial space, acquired mere weeks prior on the promise of potential and a palatable price tag, hadn't advertised all its secrets. Nestled in a neighborhood breathing quiet respectability, the structure seemed straightforward. The estate agent, all smiles and square footage, had conveniently omitted the subterranean anomaly during the walkthrough. Elias hadn't even clocked it initially. It wasn't until later, mapping the interior landscape with his friend Kai, that they nudged aside a grimy fuse panel to reveal the portal, a starved sliver of a door, weeping rust from hinges that screeched like tormented souls when forced open. It gave way to concrete steps plunging into shadow. The air that coiled up to meet them was ancient, redolent of wet stone and things long undisturbed. His phone's beam sliced through the stagnant atmosphere. Not a garage, really, more a concrete oubliette, perhaps capable of swallowing a single, compact vehicle or a pair of motorcycles. The floor, a cartographer's nightmare of fissures, sprawled unevenly. Walls bloomed with umber mold, and a scattering of skeletal tools lay abandoned in one corner. A naked socket hung from frayed wiring, bulb long gone, offering no hope of easy illumination. Seeing no immediate utility in this neglected appendage of the property, Elias had mentally shelved it, turning his attention elsewhere. Until that weekend dedicated to wrestling with the building's aged electrical system, ensuring its compliance with modern demands, he began methodically upstairs, testing switches, probing outlets, scrutinizing the main breaker panel. All seemed functional, if dated. Then the memory of the basement annex surfaced. Tools in hand, Elias descended. The steps felt precarious, slick with damp, some chipped like old teeth. A distinct chill permeated the space, the miasma of mildew intensifying with each downward step. He swept his flashlight's beam across the oppressive closeness. Tucked in a corner, separate from the main system, was another fuse panel. Its metal casing bore the patina of rust along its edges. Opening it required a determined tug. Inside, a chaotic mismatch of fuses resided, some looking positively archaic, one cavity starkly empty. Elias muttered a curse at the previous owner's negligence. And then, shh, grr, a sound that clawed its way up from the far gloom, near a tottering rack of forgotten things. Metal torturing concrete, a slow, deliberate friction. His chest constricted. He swung the light towards the shelf, but stillness reigned. Hello? His voice sounded thin, absorbed by the heavy air. Silence answered, punctuated only by the distant, rhythmic weeping of water in unseen pipes. He tried to rationalize. Echoes, the building settling, debris shifting within the walls. Hesitantly, he approached the shelf, shifted aside some decomposing cardboard boxes, peered behind. Nothing but damp, stained concrete. An unease prickled at him, but he forced himself back to the fuse box. Minutes crawled by. Then it came again, the grating symphony resuming, amplified, insistent, heavier this time. The sound crawled over his skin like insects. His screwdriver clattered to the floor as he whirled around. Still nothing moved, yet the palpable sense of presence thickened the air, cold and watchful. He made a slow circuit of the perimeter, flashlight beam trembling, probing the Stygian corners. His pulse hammered in his ears. He found nothing. No intruder. No displaced object. Escape. The concrete pressed in. His legs felt leaden, his grip slick on the flashlight. Each footstep seemed to boom in the confinement. Back upstairs, rational thought wrestled with primal dread, settling foundations, rattling pipes. Logical explanations felt flimsy, inadequate against the texture, the intention of that sound. The unsettling possibility bloomed. Trespassers, squatters claiming the forgotten depths. The building wasn't yet fully secured. That thought festered. A thorough search was imperative. Come morning. Sleep offered no refuge that night, haunted by echoes of scraping metal. Dawn found Elias clad in work clothes, armed anew, a heavy-duty torch whose beam felt more substantial, and a short crowbar tucked into his belt, more for courage than any specific threat. He parked directly out front, the Sunday morning street deserted. Inside, the familiar musty greeting from the basement doorway prickled his nostrils. He descended the creaking stairs, attempting a lightness he didn't feel. At the bottom, he paused, the powerful beam of his new flashlight carving wide arcs through the gloom. The concrete floor showed only his own fading footprints from the day before, overlaid with a fine skein of dust. He scoured every recess, behind the fuse box, under the decrepit workbench, displacing the shelf entirely from the wall, kicking aside splintered planks. He listened, straining his ears against the silence. Nothing. Half an hour yielded only frustration, mixed with a confusing surge of relief. He wanted answers, yet dreaded finding them. Resigned, he turned back to the fuse panel. He slotted in a replacement fuse, checked the rudimentary circuits, trying to ignore the clammy cold seeping into his arms. By the time he finished, hunger gnawed. He started back up the stairs. Halfway up, hope flickering, the sound erupted again, sharp, definite, directly below where he'd just stood. Elias pivoted, light stabbing downwards. Empty. He descended once more, heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. "If someone's down here, I'm calling the police," he choked out, the threat sounding feeble even to himself. Only the damp hush answered, feeling somehow heavier, more expectant. Another circuit, another fruitless search. His nerves frayed. He finally retreated, locking the basement door firmly behind him. He clung to the upper levels in the following days, immersing himself in paint fumes and contractor quotes. Yet, the basement door remained a cold spot in his periphery, a silent accusation. The memory of the sound was a physical thing, raising the hairs on his arms whenever he passed too close. Necessity eventually forced another descent. He needed precise measurements. Ignoring potential storage space felt wasteful. Bundled in a heavy jacket despite the mild weather outside, he carried a bright work lamp on a long extension cord, his phone fully charged. A small knife waited in his pocket. He rigged the lamp near the fuse box, its harsh glare pushing back the shadows, offering fragile comfort. As Elias meticulously recorded dimensions onto a clipboard, glancing nervously over his shoulder, the lamp stuttered, plunging the space into momentary twilight. And in that flicker, a stark silhouette against the far wall, tall, still, indisputably present. Then the light flared back to full, insistent brightness. Nothing, just weeping mortar and peeling paint. He grabbed the work lamp, its cord trailing, and crept towards the spot, the beam held like a weapon. He swept it across the wall, the floor, the ceiling. No scuff marks, no lingering disturbance. He fought to steady his ragged breathing, hands trembling uncontrollably. The moldy air felt suffocating, the walls closing in. A trick of the light, a shadow cast by his own movement. Goosebumps prickled his skin, denying the easy explanation. He began gathering his tools with frantic haste. Right then, impossibly close, directly behind him, shh! The sound ripped through the air, visceral, violent, like stone grinding bone. Elias spun, the lamp swinging wildly, casting frantic shadows. Empty space mocked him. A cold nausea churned in his stomach. He backed away, step by deliberate step, towards the stairs, the unseen weight of eyes pressing on his back. He fled, slamming the door, the heavy click of the new padlock. He'd installed a desperate punctuation mark. Now, the basement door wears that formidable padlock constantly. Elias descends, only when unavoidable, each step heavier than the last. The air remains frigid, pregnant with the scent of old decay and something else, something indefinable. Faint scrapes sometimes tease the edge of hearing from behind the sealed door, especially when the rest of the building falls quiet. A flicker in the periphery sends ice down his spine. Rationality suggests stress, the building's groans, his own overtaxed nerves. But the sound, the shape glimpsed in failing light, he hasn't shared the full extent of it with anyone. Becoming the proprietor of the haunted garage holds no appeal. He won't install cameras. Some truths are better left shrouded in darkness, perhaps. He works upstairs, acutely aware of the sealed space below, the silence that isn't truly silent. He moves quickly on his rare descents, leaving the door ajar for swift retreat, feeling the cold cling to him long after he surfaces. He has no answers, only the profound, unshakable sense that he is merely a custodian in a place that harbors something else, something patient, something waiting in the cold dark, watching him go. That porcelain vase, it was the harbinger. The first time it shifted, a mere tremor on the mahogany side table, I dismissed it as a trick of the eye, a settling of the ancient floorboards beneath. By its third spectral slide, denial fractured, leaving behind the chilling certainty that this house, this favor undertaken for a friend, was fundamentally wrong. What began as a simple month of tending Genevieve's inherited estate had curdled into a vigil against the unseen, a slow descent where the feeling of being perpetually observed tightened its grip daily. A question began to haunt my waking hours. Would I survive this house-sitting tenure? My name is Alara, and I've always navigated life by the compass of reason. Phantoms and hauntings were fodder for fiction, amusing specters confined to paper and screen. So, when my dearest Genevieve needed someone to watch her Victorian behemoth during a month-long overseas assignment, I readily agreed. The house, admittedly venerable and prone to groans, possessed a certain charm, and I anticipated a tranquil interlude filled with quiet workdays and languid weekends. The initial days unfolded with benign predictability. I established a rhythm, remote work bathed in the slanted afternoon light, followed by explorations of the home's labyrinthine corners each evening. Genevieve had mentioned its long lineage within her family, a history palpable in the curious marriage of inherited antiques and contemporary comforts. It was the fourth night when the placidity ruptured. Curled upon a velvet chaise, lost in a novel, an abrupt coldness permeated the air, sharp and unnatural. The ambient warmth seemed instantly leached away, and I could have sworn a whisper, gossamer thin and indistinct as sighing wind, brushed my ear. An old house's draughts, an overtaxed imagination, these were the rational anchors I clung to. Then the vase, that delicate piece, perched innocently across the room. A peripheral flicker registered its movement, not a fall, but a definite, smooth glide of an inch, perhaps two. I blinked, vision swimming momentarily. Staring directly, it was immobile, placid. A nervous laugh escaped me. The house's atmosphere was undeniably potent. Sleep came fitfully that night, frayed at the edges, despite my resolve to banish the incident. A day passed in quiet normalcy, lulling me back towards ease. Yet, as dusk bled through the tall windows, the disquiet returned, a familiar phantom limb. I stood at the kitchen sink, rinsing dinner plates, when a distinct thud resonated from the upper floor, like a heavy book hitting the ground. Heart hammering against my ribs, I ascended the creaking staircase, braced for an intruder. But the landing and hallways stretched empty, silent, still. A meticulous check of each room yielded nothing disturbed. As I turned to descend, a discordant note struck my eye. The vase, the same vase. It now rested on a narrow console table in the upstairs hallway. I was certain, utterly certain, it had been downstairs. "Control yourself, Ilara," I murmured, the words feeling hollow. "You are unraveling." But a deeper instinct, cold and sure, insisted otherwise. The house felt poised, expectant, holding its breath. Sleep became a battleground that night. Every settling groan, every sigh of the wind against the eaves jolted me alert. I drifted into a restless slumber only in the gray pre-dawn hours, waking abruptly to a scene of quiet chaos. Every single kitchen cabinet door stood wide open. Frozen in the doorway, a wave of icy dread washed over me. There was no possibility, none, that I had left them like this. With trembling hands, I began closing them, one by one, my nerves screaming at each soft click. As the final door swung shut, a shadow detached itself from the periphery, flowing across the far wall. I spun, but there was nothing, only empty space and the unnerving silence. I phoned Genevieve later that day, forcing a casual tone, inquiring if the house had any peculiarities I should be aware of. Her laughter echoed down the line. The place was old, full of character, she assured me, nothing more sinister than rattling pipes. I wanted desperately to accept her dismissal, but the knot tightening in my stomach remained unconvinced. The ensuing days saw an escalation. Objects relocated themselves when my gaze was averted. Footfalls echoed from empty floors, above or below me. One morning, I woke to find every light in the house blazing, despite my distinct memory of extinguishing them before retiring. Sundown became synonymous with dread. Nightfall animated the house. Shadows writhed with independent life. and fleeting figures flickered in mirrors and polished surfaces, vanishing the instant I tried to focus. Roughly 2 weeks into my stay, music woke me, faint, ethereal, like a memory carried on the air, yet undeniably an old waltz. Heart pounding a frantic rhythm, I crept downstairs, drawn towards the living room. The sight awaiting me there remained seared into my memory, a tableau from a fever dream. The furniture had been thrust against the walls, clearing a vast space in the room's center, and within that space, things moved. The vase, the catalyst, spun slowly, suspended in mid-air. Books drifted past, pages rustling as if stirred by an invisible breeze. And at the heart of it all, 2 indistinct shadows swayed and turned, locked in a silent dance to the spectral melody. I stood transfixed, mind struggling to process the impossible ballet. As I watched, one shadowy form seemed to turn its attention towards me, faceless, featureless, yet I felt its gaze, ancient and knowing. The music ceased instantly. Everything, vase, books, shadows, dropped, crashing to the floor in discordant finality. I fled back to my room, bolting the door, burrowing under the duvet like a terrified child. Sleep was unthinkable. I lay rigid until dawn, startled by every creak and whisper of the house settling around me. The following day, departure seemed the only sane option. Yet something tethered me, stubbornness perhaps, or a morbid curiosity, some primal need to understand. I chose to remain, to delve into the history woven into the very fabric of this place. I spent hours scouring digital archives, local histories, searching for any thread that might unravel the enigma. What I unearthed sent a fresh chill down my spine. The house, erected in the late 19th century by a prosperous industrialist, had been filled with his and his wife's collection of global art and antiques. Their life, however, was shattered by the inexplicable disappearance of their only daughter. The couple withered soon after, grief-stricken, and the property cycled through various hands before landing in Genevieve's family. Reading about the lost girl, an intuition resonated deep within me. She was connected to these phenomena. Was it her spirit lingering here, adrift? Were the dancing shadows her bereaved parents, eternally searching? That night, propelled by a volatile cocktail of fear and resolve, I decided to confront the presence. I sat in the living room, on the very spot where I'd witnessed the ghostly waltz, and spoke into the charged silence. "I know you're here." My voice trembled slightly. "I'm not leaving. I'm not afraid. Please, show yourself." A protracted silence answered, thick and heavy. Then gradually, the familiar cold descended. The vase, that infernal vase, slid across the table, stopping directly before me, and in the antique mirror mounted above the fireplace, a face began to coalesce. Young, perhaps 12 or 13, etched with a profound sadness and unbearable loneliness. As I watched, mesmerized, her translucent lips formed silent words. "Help me." In that instant, the fear dissolved, supplanted by an overwhelming wave of pity, a surge of purpose. This wasn't malice. It was a soul adrift, ensnared here for over a century. The subsequent week became a frantic immersion into the esoteric. I consumed books on spiritualism, consulted online forums, even attempted to piece together the scant clues surrounding the girl's fate long ago. The phenomena persisted, but their characters shifted. They felt less menacing, imbued now with a palpable sorrow. Objects still moved, but gently, almost hesitantly. The music returned sometimes, softer now, a mournful refrain, and occasionally, in the deep hush of night, I'd hear the unmistakable sound of a child weeping. On my final night, I felt prepared. Candles demarcated a circle on the living room floor. Burning sage perfumed the air as I recited the words I'd painstakingly researched and memorized. The atmosphere grew dense, electric. The candle flames danced wildly, and within their flickering illumination, she materialized. The girl from the mirror stood before me, shimmering, ephemeral. A smile touched her spectral lips, radiating pure relief. As I held my breath, her form began to thin, becoming increasingly transparent until she vanished completely. With her departure, the oppressive weight that had suffocated the house for so long lifted, leaving behind only stillness and peace. When Genevieve returned, I recounted everything. To my astonishment, she accepted my story without reservation, confiding that generations of her family had sensed something amiss in the house, though none had experienced it with such intensity. I moved my belongings out the next day, profoundly altered. My staunch rationalism had irrevocably cracked. I no longer scoff at tales whispered in the dark. I understand now that the world holds dimensions beyond easy explanation, realities dwelling in the shadowed interstices between knowledge and fear. And sometimes, late at night, when the wind sighs just so, I fancy I can hear the faint, lingering strains of an old waltz, a poignant reminder that not all hauntings seek to terrify, that sometimes a spirit needs only acknowledgement, a compassionate ear, a helping hand. Still, I confess, porcelain vases now give me pause. The first time the silhouette detached itself from the station's gloom and boarded the carriage, it registered as nothing more than ambient detail. 3 stops later, its continued presence, a fixed point in the rattling periphery, sent a tremor of ice through my veins. As the train bled passengers into the late hour, the compartments emptying like drained lungs, a horrifying certainty crystallized. This wasn't happenstance, not another weary traveler. He was a shadow clinging to my path. And I was sealed inside a hurtling metal artery, slicing through subterranean blackness with nowhere, absolutely nowhere to flee. My name is Ilara. This city, with its concrete canyons and electric pulse, has been my home for half a decade. The late shift pilgrimages via subway, the spectral figures that haunt the fluorescent underworld, the low hum of caution that accompanies a woman navigating urban spaces alone after midnight. These are familiar textures, but no amount of familiarity could have woven a shield for that particular night. It was a Tuesday bleeding into Wednesday, the clock having just sighed past 2 a.m. as I descended the station steps. The air hung thick and still. Above, the lights buzzed with a brutal fluorescence against my fatigue-laden eyes after a long evening tendon bar. The platform stretched out, nearly deserted, save for a scattered few denizens of the deep night awaiting the final train. He materialized then, drawing my gaze instantly. Tall, swallowed by a hooded sweatshirt pulled low, hands plunged deep into pockets. A contained velocity marked his movements, a tension coiled within his frame that snagged my attention. Still, I dismissed it. This was the city's witching hour. Peculiarity was the norm. The train screamed into the station, exhaling a gust of tired air. I chose a seat near the doors, the plastic cool beneath me. To my disquiet, the hooded figure, despite the car's echoing emptiness, settled directly opposite. My phone became a shield, its screen a fabricated point of focus, my gaze studiously averted. Relief arrived noisily at the next stop. A surge of boisterous teenagers flooded the car, their laughter and overlapping conversations a welcome sonic buffer. I breathed a little easier, grateful for the sudden density of bodies between myself and the unnerving stillness across the aisle. But their energy dissipated as quickly as it had arrived. 2 stops later, they spilled back onto a platform, leaving a vacuum, and he remained, still directly opposite. Still I sensed, watching from the impenetrable shadow beneath his hood. A frantic drummer took up residence behind my ribs. Nothing, I insisted internally. Just exhaustion playing tricks. Then, my eyes snagged on his hands. Fists, knuckles white mountains, tendons stark cords beneath the skin. And they trembled. A minute, terrifying vibration, as if barely leashing some immense, volatile force. Time to relocate. Feigning casual interest in the grimy transit map plastered to the wall, I rose and ambled towards the far end of the carriage. A flicker in my peripheral vision confirmed it. He stood too. Another stop bled away a few more souls. The car's population dwindled to 4. Myself, the hooded man, an elderly woman adrift in sleep in a corner seat, a businessman utterly absorbed by the glow of his laptop. Panic began its cold creep up my spine. My own station remained several minutes distant, and the thought of disembarking onto unfamiliar, desolate streets was unappealing. Yet, the prospect of remaining captive in this accelerating confinement with him grew more monstrous by the second. Then, he moved. A single, liquid motion carried him across the aisle. He sank onto the seat beside me. The proximity brought his scent, stale cigarette smoke, laced with something sharp, metallic, that soured my stomach. "Evening," his voice rasped, low and gravelly. "Looking a bit spooked. Just trying to be friendly." I muttered an incoherent refusal, something about needing to make a call, and scrambled to my feet, aiming for the relative sanctuary near the sleeping woman. Herd safety, a primal instinct whispered, but a backward glance confirmed the nightmare. He had risen again. He was closing the distance. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic pulse, audible even over the train's rhythmic clatter and screech. My gaze darted desperately towards the businessman, a silent, frantic plea for intervention, for acknowledgement. He remained oblivious, cocooned in his digital world, the unfolding tension invisible to him. The train began to decelerate, brakes hissing, announcing the approach of the next station. A decision, instantaneous and absolute, fractured the panic. This wasn't my stop, but it had to be. Anywhere felt safer than this rolling cage with its predator. The door slid open, and I launched myself through the gap. Footsteps pounded heavily behind me, fast. I flew up the stairs, taking them in 2s, 3s, my lungs searing. I burst onto a street bathed in the sickly orange glow of sparse lamps, casting elongated, dancing shadows. Blindly, I ran, directionless, propelled only by the desperate need for distance. His breathing, harsh and ragged, sounded unnervingly close behind. I rounded a corner, momentum carrying me into a narrow passage between buildings. Brick walls rose on either side. A dead end. The realization struck with the force of a physical blow, panic fogging my thoughts. Trapped. I spun, back pressed against the cold, unforgiving brick. He stood silhouetted at the alley's mouth, his face finally thrown into sharp relief by the merciless glare of a security floodlight. His eyes were wide, feral, his mouth stretched into a grotesque parody of a grin. "Gotcha," he breathed, taking a deliberate step forward. "Nowhere left to run, little bird." In that instant, something fractured within me. The fear that had held me rigid, that had propelled my flight, didn't vanish. It transmuted, flashed into incandescent rage. A weariness settled deep in my bones, weary of the fear, weary of the vulnerability, weary of men like him who saw solitary women as prey. As his hand reached out, instinct detonated. My knee snapped upward, connecting with brutal precision against his groin. A choked grunt escaped him as he doubled over. Seizing the momentary advantage, I shoved with all my strength, sending him stumbling backward off balance. Then I ran. I ran with a ferocity I hadn't known I possessed, adrenaline lending wings to my feet, the desperate scramble out of the alley, fueled by pure survival. I didn't cease my frantic sprint until the bright, welcoming lights of a 24-hour diner at a busy intersection promised sanctuary. I burst through the glass doors, sucking in ragged breaths. The waitress behind the counter took one look at my disheveled state, my wild eyes, and wordlessly guided me to a booth, a glass of water appearing almost instantly. "Police?" she asked quietly, her hand already reaching for the phone. I could only nod, my hand trembling violently as I lifted the water to my lips. As her calm voice relayed the situation over the line, the dam finally broke. The enormity of the preceding minutes crashed over me in shuddering waves. The officers arrived swiftly, their presence a strange mix of comfort and formality. They took my statement, their questions clinical, and offered an escort home. Patrols, they assured me, would be increased. The following days were a blur of hyper-awareness. Every sudden noise made me flinch. Every passing stranger seemed to wear a hidden threat. The subway became unthinkable territory. Precious funds bled away on taxis and ride shares. But beneath the persistent tremor of shock, a different current began to flow. Resolve. This encounter would not dictate the geography of my life, would not shrink my world. I enrolled in self-defense classes, the movements feeling awkward at first, then empowering. I purchased a personal alarm, its shrill potential a small comfort. I connected with other women in my building, forging a network for late-night commutes, a fragile web of mutual support. My voice, initially hesitant, found strength. I shared my story, transforming trauma into advocacy, demanding better safety protocols on public transit. I spoke at community forums, penned letters to city officials, harnessed the reach of social media to illuminate the shadows where fear thrived. Imperceptibly at first, then more tangibly, change began to ripple outwards. The station where my ordeal began saw upgraded lighting, the unblinking eyes of more security cameras. A new app emerged, offering a discreet channel for commuters to signal distress. More uniformed officers began to walk the late-night trains. Eventually, I returned to the subway's embrace. That first descent back into the subterranean world was fraught with anxiety, my heart leaping with every arriving train, every unfamiliar face that boarded. But I did it, and the next time was marginally easier, and the time after that, easier still. I never encountered the hooded figure again, not in the waking world, yet sometimes the phantom echo of his pursuing footsteps resurfaces in dreams, the memory of cold brick sharp against my back. On those nights, I wake slicked with sweat, the ghost of a scream caught in my throat, but I breathe through it. I remind myself, I am safe, I am resilient, I endured. The experience undeniably reshaped me. Caution is now etched deeper into my awareness, a constant companion. But alongside it resides a newfound solidity, an assertiveness forged in fire. I understand now the reserves of strength within me, the capacity to fight back, to reclaim my own space. Sometimes, riding the late train, I see her, another woman, her posture tense, her eyes darting nervously towards a male passenger. When I do, I meet her gaze, offer a small, steady smile. Perhaps I shift my seat, closing the distance, becoming a silent, watchful presence beside her. Because this is the paradox of the city, of existence itself. Danger lurks, yes, shadows persist, but so does connection, solidarity, the quiet power of shared vigilance. We watch for each other, we stand with each other, we deny fear the final victory. So, if you find yourself navigating the city's veins late at night, a flicker of unease stirring within you, remember this story. Remember your own latent strength. And remember, you are rarely truly alone. Look around, connect, ask for help. For while predators may stalk the night, protectors walk among us too. And sometimes, when necessity demands, we discover the protector resides within ourselves. The groan of corroded hinges was our first mistake, a sound ripping through the mountain stillness. An exhalation of rot rushed to meet us, thick with the dust of ages and a deeper, colder wrongness. By then, retreat was a forgotten path. We journeyed too far, lured by a curiosity that now felt like a tightening cord around our throats. I am Elias. I never imagined a weekend escape into the Appalachians with friends could curdle into a shadow that would forever cling to the edges of my days. We were 5. Myself, Finn, my oldest friend, his partner, Chloe, and the collegiate echoes of Reese and Maya. Months of anticipation had honed our eagerness to lose ourselves in the vast forested embrace of those ancient hills. Initially, the expedition unfolded like a promise kept. The air, sharp and crystalline under a vault of flawless blue. Laughter bounced between us as we navigated the trail, the panorama of tree-clad slopes, a breathtaking distraction. It was Finn, straying from the marked route in search of a quicker return to camp, whose shout arrested us. "Elias! Everyone! Look at this!" We converged on the spot, confronted by a moor half swallowed by grasping vines and shadow, an old mine entrance. Its timber skeleton sagged, decayed, a rusted placard whispering warnings we barely registered. Yet, a potent magnetism emanated from the opening, a silent dare to unravel its secrets. "We can't go in there," Chloe murmured, giving voice to the tremor that had already found purchase in my own chest. "It looks unstable." But Reese, ever the cavalier, was already fumbling with his torch. "Seriously, where's the spirit? A quick look, that's all." My own caution should have allied with Chloe's. I should have planted my feet, insisted. Instead, the siren call of the unknown pulled the words from me. "Right, just a peek inside." A question whose answer would echo in the hollow spaces left behind. What harm could it do? The aperture was deceptively narrow. We shuffled through singly, swallowed by the earth. Reese's torch beam sliced a fragile wound into the absolute black, revealing a passage that plunged into inscrutable depths. The air hung heavy, sodden with the scent of damp earth and something metallic, underscored by the rhythmic weeping of unseen water. "Incredible," Finn breathed, his voice strangely amplified. "Think what might be down here." We pressed onward, deeper into the mine's gullet. Excitement began to fray, replaced by a subtle, creeping disquiet. The tunnel contorted, bifurcated, leading us ever downward. I attempted a mental map, but the branching passages quickly dissolved into a labyrinth. We were adrift in the dark. And then, we found it. Reese's light swept across a shape huddled against the wall. A collective gasp hitched in our throats. It was skeletal, draped in the rotted vestiges of miner's garb. But this was no relic of a bygone era. The bones were scoured unnervingly clean, as if by meticulous, recent hunger. "We have to leave," Maya whispered, her voice brittle with nascent panic. Yet, as we turned, a chilling certainty descended. The way back was lost to us. In the unsteady glare of our lights, every tunnel seemed a mirror of the lost. "All right, nobody panic," I managed, forcing steadiness into my tone. "We pick a direction, stay together. We have to hit the entrance eventually." We chose blindly, plunging down another passage. With every footfall, the conviction grew. We were descending further into the earth's bowels. The temperature plummeted. The silence thickened, broken only by our ragged breaths and the persistent drip, drip, drip of water. That's when the sound reached us, a chthonic rumble that vibrated less in the air and more in the bone, echoing from the darkness we just traversed. "What was that?" Chloe whispered, her hand clamping onto Finn's arm. Before a response could form, it came again, closer. And then, caught in the frantic dance of our torch beams, movement. At first glance, perhaps human, but as it shambled nearer, the illusion shattered. A starved geometry of limbs too long, skin like taut parchment over bone. Its face, a sunken horror, vacant sockets cradling a pinprick phosphorescence, and a rictus grin filled with splintered ivory. We fled. Sheer terror lent wings to our feet. We scrambled through the tunnels, directionless, driven solely by the need to escape the slavering snarls that reverberated off the rock walls, steadily gaining. We erupted into a vast chamber, a fleeting flare of hope extinguished as our lights illuminated the grotesque tableau within. The floor was a carpet of bones, hundreds, perhaps thousands, scattered like discarded thoughts. Not all were human. Some were warped, alien geometries, hinting at anatomies that defied natural law. "Dear God," Maya choked out. "What is this place?" No time for contemplation. The creature surged into the cavern, and it was not alone. More spilled from adjacent tunnels, their eyes glinting with a famished light. "There!" Finn yelled, pointing towards a tight fissure slicing through the far wall. "Maybe we can fit." Our sole chance. We bolted towards it, the creature's hot, fetid breath searing the backs of our necks. Chloe slipped through first, then Maya. Reese followed, but his broader frame snagged halfway. Raw terror bloomed in his eyes. His voice, raw. "Elias, go. Just go. I'll slow them down." My instinct screamed to pull him free, but the gnashing darkness was upon us. Finn shoved me violently towards the opening. I scraped through, rough stone tearing at skin and clothes. My last sight was Reese, turning, his face a mask of grim resolve against the surging tide of nightmares. On the other side, the passage angled sharply upward. Hope, fierce and desperate, surged anew. This had to lead out. We ran, lungs burning, the sounds of the hunt still echoing faintly behind us. Finally, blessedly, a glimmer of light ahead. With a final, agonized burst of effort, we burst from the mind's embrace into the bruised twilight. We didn't cease running until the familiar flimsy sanctuary of our campsite, collapsing onto the damp ground, air tearing through our ravaged throats. Only then did the full weight of the horror crash down. Reese was gone, consumed by that subterranean nightmare, and the chilling question remained: could those things follow us into the world above? We abandoned camp with frantic haste, leaving gear scattered behind. The trek back to the car was a fugue state of adrenaline and exhaustion. At the nearest town, our frantic narrative was met with polite skepticism, veiled concerns about our mental stability. A search party was organized, meticulously combing the area. They found nothing. No trace of Reese. No sign of the mine entrance we described. It was as if the mountain itself had inhaled it. In the ensuing days, weeks, we grappled with the impossible. Shared delusion, hallucinogenic gases. Yet beneath the rationalizations, the terrible certainty persisted. What we witnessed, what pursued us, was real. We forged a pact of silence, an attempt to bury the memory and reclaim some semblance of normalcy. But the darkness lingers. Sleep offers no respite, only replays. The bone-strewn cavern, the luminous eyes, Reese's final shout swallowed by the abyss. I haven't set foot on a hiking trail since. Neither, I believe, have the others. We've drifted, fractured by the shared trauma, each navigating the internal wreckage alone. Yet sometimes, in the dead quiet of night, a message will appear on my phone from Finn, or Chloe, or Maya. A single word. Remember, and I know. They too are awake, staring into the dark, forever haunted by what the mountain held. What were those entities? An undiscovered species dwelling in Earth's deepest veins, the grotesque outcome of some forgotten experiment, or something older, stranger, utterly alien? The answers remain buried, perhaps forever. But this I know, the world holds shadows deeper than we conceive, horrors nesting just beneath the fragile veneer of the known. And sometimes curiosity is a key that unlocks doors best left eternally sealed. So, should your wanderings lead you to the remote places, to an old mine shaft weeping secrets into the wilderness, grant yourself this mercy. Walk on. Do not pause. Do not look back. And for the love of all that is sane, do not enter. You cannot fathom what awaits in the patient dark, eternally hungry. As for me, I keep to the worn paths now, forever glancing over my shoulder, forever wondering if those things might one day claw their way to the surface. And if they do, heaven preserve us. Precisely when the landscape began its subtle insurrection is impossible now to say. 6 months prior, perhaps, I'd rescued it from a neighbor's curbside accumulation, this framed vista destined for the landfill. A placid scene it depicted: emerald swaths, clustered woods, low swells of distant hills. A fence bisected the foreground, proximate to wildflowers and the mirrored stillness of a small pond. Its purpose was simple: to occupy a stark vacancy along the corridor wall, a silent sentinel between slumber and ablution. Innocuous, surely. Aged, its pigments perhaps time-leached, yet the frame possessed a certain dignity, the colors a muted tranquility. After the initial novelty faded, perhaps a fortnight, it dissolved into the background, an unremarked fixture of my daily transit. Then, roughly 4 weeks ago, a morning passage brought me up short, an inexplicable awareness focused on the clutch of trees stage left. Had they not always hugged the fence line more intimately? Now, a perceptible distance separated them. My memory, interrogated, offered no certainty. Perhaps I'd never truly seen it before. The canvas bore the fine craquelure of age, thin fissures webbing the sky. Could the play of light upon these imperfections conjure such spatial distortions? Dismissing the thought, I proceeded with my day. Mere days dissolved before another discrepancy arrested me. The heavens above the painted hills seemed bruised, the clouds imbued with a pre-storm somberness I failed to recollect. My memory insisted on gentle cerulean, skies of benign disposition. Leaning closer, scrutinizing the textured impasto, the brushstrokes composing those now ominous clouds appeared agitated, almost violent. My fingertip rapped against the frame. Solid, venerable wood. The canvas itself seemed unchanged. Nothing stirred under my gaze. Self-reproach followed. Surely my mind, burdened, was merely unearthing details previously overlooked. The subsequent week saw me pause with increasing frequency before that unsettling rectangle. Each inspection yielded fresh disquiet. The sward appeared shorn one day, overgrown the next. Floral hues shifted as if seasons turned overnight within the frame. A fracture materialized in a corner of the fence. With every novel observation, a cold knot tightened in my gut, my breath catching, a faint pressure building behind my sternum. I'd rake fingers through my hair, step back, blink hard, then look again. Static. Always static, while observed, silent and inert. Yet the cumulative effect of these minute alterations was undeniable. A dryness crept into my throat whenever I neared it. Avoidance became a conscious effort, hampered by its strategic placement on that essential route. Bathroom, bedroom, Passage was unavoidable. One dawn delivered a sight that slicked my palms with sweat. Deep within the tree line, where nothing but shadow should reside, a darkness coalesced. Vague, yet undeniably anthropomorphic, a figure lurking amongst the boles. It hadn't been there. Heart hammering, I pressed closer, eyes narrowed, breath held captive. A mere daub of deeper pigment, lacking discernible features or attire, yet its posture suggested presence. A shiver traced the length of my arms. Rationalization faltered. I knew those trees. I had stared into their depths countless times. A figure would not have escaped my notice. Nights found me lingering in the unlit hallway, the painting a rectangle of deeper black against the shadows. My hand would hover near the switch, a primal reluctance to observe it in darkness taking hold. Absurd, this trepidation before mere artwork, yet my shoulders remained rigid with tension. Light flooded the corridor. The landscape seemed, for an instant, benign. Then, the figure. Closer. Definitely closer to the tree line's edge. Its form, though still indistinct, hinted at elongated limbs. My stomach churned. Retreating, I sought refuge in my bedroom, the click of the closing door loud in the sudden silence. I listened. Nothing. The metamorphoses persisted. Day by day, the shadowed form advanced, traversing the painted distance towards the foreground. The sky bled darker, trees contorted into unnatural inclinations. The fence splintered further. The grass appeared trampled, the wildflowers wilted, necrotic. I grasped at straws of logic. Had the painting always held this latent complexity? Did the hallway's illumination fluctuate with the angle of the sun? Were my own eyes betraying me? These mental defenses crumbled utterly when the sounds began. Soft, percussive ticks, like timber settling in the dead of night, emanating from the wall. Then, faint exhalations, brief and hushed, seeming to originate from the canvas itself. I'd stand rigid in the corridor, straining to capture more, the fine hairs on my neck erect. My hand, reaching out, found the frame cool to the touch. Pressing my ear close, I detected a faint, dry scraping, reminiscent of pigment disturbed. My throat constricted. Flicking the lights back on, I examined it fiercely. Unchanged from moments before, yet the figure now stood, almost flush against the fence line. Dark, hollow depressions marked where eyes should be. Its head canted, as if observing something just beyond the frame's boundary. Observing me. I recoiled, heart seizing, and fled to the living room's relative safety, sinking onto the sofa to quell the rising panic. The following day resolved my course. The painting had to go. Enough. Grasping the frame's upper edge, I heaved. It remained fast. A more determined pull yielded nothing but a groan from the wood. It felt fused to the wall, though hung by a single simple nail. Pushing, pulling, straining. The frame creaked, the painted surface seeming to ripple minutely beneath the protective glass, but it refused release. A flathead screwdriver, employed for leverage, merely chipped plaster around the intractable frame. Sweat beaded on my forehead, my jaw clenched. One final, full-bodied effort produced only an agonized creak from the frame and aching muscles. Defeated, breathing raggedly, I stepped back. For now. Night fell. I extinguished the hallway lights, assuming a listening post in the darkness, utterly still. A delicate tapping commenced, seeming to originate from within the frame, wood on wood. It was followed by a soft, wet sliding noise. My hand shot to the switch. Light blazed. The painting's surface gleamed, unnaturally slick, as if freshly varnished. I leaned in. The figure stood directly behind the fence now, the wooden slats before it splintered and broken. Its silhouette seemed taller, more gaunt. The sky was a near uniform black, the grass utterly flattened. Inches away, my face hovering before the glass, I perceived minuscule beads of moisture clinging to the painted fence. Tentatively, I touched the glass, expecting solidity. My fingertip met dampness. An acrid scent, old paint, and something else filled my nostrils. Revulsion sent me stumbling back, wiping my contaminated finger frantically on my trousers. I retreated to my bedroom, the lock clicking decisively behind me. Sleep offered no sanctuary. Twice I startled awake, convinced of footfalls pacing the corridor. Listening at the door, I heard only a faint crackling. Flinging the door open, I slapped the light switch. Stillness reigned. The painting hung, quiescent, the figure staring blankly from its prison, eyes like pits of voided pigment. I retreated, leaving my bedroom light burning, and sat vigil on the edge of my bed until dawn leaked through the window. Morning brought futile attempts to enlist aid. Alistair claimed prior commitments. Ben's phone rang unanswered. I stood before the painting, arms crossed, trapped in its morbid gravity. It had worsened. The scene plunged into near-total darkness, trees writhing like tormented limbs, the fence reduced to skeletal remains, the grass patchy and dead. The figure dominated the foreground, its hands, dark lumps of paint suggesting knuckles, gripping a fence post. Its head was bowed, seemingly exerting pressure against the barrier. Tapping the glass again elicited a faint, hollow resonance. A damp cloth applied to the frame snagged instantly on rough, raw wood, leaving minuscule splinters embedded in the fabric and shallow scratches stinging my palm. Lips pressed tight, I fought down a wave of panic. A new strategy. The hammer, retrieved from the garage. Tentative taps on the frame, sought weakness, finding none. Harder blows bounced harmlessly, leaving no mark. I struck the glass, once, twice, intact. My arm trembled with exertion and dread. Aiming for the frame's corner, I swung with greater force. A dull thud. The painting remained unmoved. Breathing grew labored, my chest aching. Defeated, I leaned against the opposite wall, the hammer heavy in my grip. The thought of abandoning the house, walking away forever surfaced. But my life was here. Keys, wallet, existence. I remained, hammer clutched, paralyzed by indecision, mouth parched. That evening, defiance manifested as illumination. Every light blazed. Hallway, bathroom, kitchen. From the living room, seated strategically, I watched the painting obliquely. The figure appeared to strain forward, pressing against the inner surface. A visible bulge distorted the paint. Rising, sneakers squeaking on the polished floor, I approached, legs unsteady, hand trembling. Reaching out, my finger met the glass. It yielded, soft, like cooling asphalt, like viscous gel. I snatched my hand back, heart galloping. A faint chemical tang hung in the air. Wet paint, solvents. A cough escaped me as I stumbled backward, bumping a small console table. A sharp click overhead. The hallway light flickered, dimmed, then held. My gaze snapped back to the painting. The figure pressed its tenebrous form against the yielding surface. I saw the painted fence posts buckle under the strain. An arm, indistinct but undeniable, pushed outward, stretching the very fabric of the scene. A wet, sucking noise accompanied the movement. My throat seized, muscles locking, retreating further, sweat tracing cold paths down my neck. My limbs felt leaden, unresponsive to the urgent command to flee. Escape, temporary though it might be, seemed the only recourse. I reached the front door, wrenched it open, and stepped onto the porch, pulling it shut and hearing the lock engage behind me. The cool night air was a shock. The paint smell clung stubbornly to my clothes. Wiping my face on my sleeve, my head swam. An hour I remained there, waiting, breathing, trying to impose calm on the frantic pulse beneath my skin. But where else could I go? This was home. Reluctantly, I turned back. Re-entering the house, a soft scraping sound reached me from the hallway, something dragging across wood. Turning the corner, I saw the painting askew, no longer flush, its bottom edge protruding slightly from the wall. I approached with glacial slowness. The surface, once glass, now looked distorted, like heat-melted plastic. The figure, it was halfway through. A dark, amorphous shape, extruding its head and shoulders from the canvas. Paint, thick, dark fluid, weeping from the breach, dripping onto the floorboards below. The stench of turpentine intensified. Frozen, breath-trapped, I heard it. A low, ragged wheezing. The emergent head shifted slightly. Featureless, a mere concentration of darkness, with rudimentary bumps suggesting a face. Its shoulders were broad, asymmetrical. It wore darkness. Backing away, stumbling, I fumbled for the light switch again, flicking it uselessly. The light flickered, unstable. The figure slid further, its passage punctuated by wet, tearing sounds. An arm became visible, bent at an impossible angle, fingers dripping pigment onto the floor. The corridor reeked, the fumes stinging my eyes, making me cough into my hand. I retreated until my back hit the opposite wall. The hammer felt useless, my grip too weak, too shaky. I took a hesitant step forward, raising it, but the thing continued its inexorable egress, the sound of its self-extraction like cracking knuckles amplified. Intolerable. I bolted into the living room, snatched a throw blanket, and rushed back, flinging it over the horrifying tableau. It slithered off immediately, pooling on the floor. Averting my gaze, I heard it. Wet, fleshy squishing noises. I backed towards my bedroom, the entity now occupying the space between me and the bathroom, blocking any path but retreat. I slipped inside my room, keeping my eyes fixed on the hallway, pulling the door almost closed, but leaving it unlatched, refusing to be cornered. I stood panting, listening. Silence descended upon the hallway. Then, after minutes that stretched into eternity, a soft rustling, the faint groan of floorboards bearing weight. My heart slammed against my ribs. My legs felt like water. Escape, out the front door, but that meant traversing the hallway. I waited, ears straining. The pungent odor of paint seeped under the door, cloying, dizzying. I had to leave. Now. Keys and wallet snatched from the nightstand. I took a shuddering breath and pulled the door open. The hallway light flickered violently, casting strobe-like shadows. The painting was empty. The frame hung warped, violated. The canvas within was a uniform, dripping blackness. The figure was gone. A scraping sound echoed from the living room. No hesitation now. I surged forward, eyes fixed on the front door, sneakers skidding on something slick, breath tearing in and out of my lungs. I reached the door, yanked it open, and burst out into the night, slamming it shut behind me. On the porch, gasping, I stared back at the closed door. The night air bit at my skin. From within the house came a muffled thud, like heavy furniture being displaced. Action felt impossible. Turning, I stumbled down the steps towards my car in the driveway. Inside, engine roaring to life. I glanced back. Lit windows offered no glimpse of movement. I sat there, the engine vibrating through me, breathing hard, the chill of drying sweat on my skin. What that thing was, I couldn't fathom, but sanctuary within those walls was unthinkable tonight. Reversing out of the driveway, hands trembling on the wheel, I drove away. The smell of paint clung to me like a shroud, my fingertips still faintly sticky. Returning was not part of any foreseeable future. Its genesis, I recall, was late one evening. Post-shower, I stood swathed in bathroom steam, observing the geography of dampness blooming across the tiles. The overhead bulb was dark. Only the hallway's anemic luminescence bled through the half-ajar door. Something aberrant caught my eye on the wall surmounting the tub. Condensation had mapped itself there, fugitive shapes sprawling on the white ceramic glaze. Mere mildew, I initially surmised, a common Rorschach of brownish discoloration. Yet, leaning closer, a certain deliberation in the pattern emerged. Edges sculpted themselves into something resembling the slope of a shoulder, perhaps the nascent curve of an arm. I narrowed my eyes. It bore the distinct impression of a human silhouette pressed hard against the tile, though the space was unequivocally empty. My fingers met the ceramic. It was glacial, slick. The odor of mold thickened the air, the unmistakable breath of sodden fabric abandoned in shadow. With a flick of the switch, the overhead light blazed. The form dissolved instantly, reverting to an innocuous patch of moisture. Fatigue, I reasoned. Sleep deprivation painting phantoms on the walls. Cracking the window admitted a sliver of cool, silent night. I brushed my teeth, gaze fixed firmly on my own reflection, then retreated to bed, banishing the thought until the subsequent nightfall. The following evening, near midnight, exhaustion pulling at my muscles after a long workday, I sought the solace of searing water. As the shower sluiced down my back, I let my eyelids fall, surrendering to the heat. Again, the main light remained off. I preferred the dim intimacy, the hallway lamp casting just enough light to render the ward in soft outlines. Where the hot spray impacted the tile directly before me, I registered a subtle shift, a peripheral flicker. My muscles locked, eyes snapped open. There, coalescing from the steam on the wall, another peculiar figuration had taken root. Not merely a stain this time, but something disturbingly facial, a suggestion around where an eye socket might be. A darker condensation smudge, hinting at a gaping mouth. A tremor ran through my shoulders, wiping water from my stinging eyes. I stared. It persisted, semi-formed, like a visage straining against a damp shroud. The mildew scent intensified, coiling in my throat. My chest constricted. I drew a ragged breath. Tentatively, I extended a hand, palm sliding across the tile. Clammy, cold. I slapped the light switch. The apparition vanished, leaving only gleaming dampness. For a long moment, I simply stood there, heart hammering against my ribs, water cascading over my face and neck. Then, abruptly, I killed the shower, dried myself with frantic haste, and stumbled out. Leaning heavily on the basin, I confronted my reflection, tired eyes staring back, water beading on skin. Nothing else shared the mirror. That night, the bathroom door stayed wide open. In the ensuing days, I waged a campaign of denial. I attacked the tiles with bristled sponges, drenched them in chemical mold remover, and ran the extractor fan religiously after each ablution. The smell receded somewhat, yet within a couple of days, I observed that whenever humidity reclaimed the small space, the stains re-emerged, striving towards shape, never perfectly anthropomorphic, but always possessed of angles and curves that echoed shoulders, chins, the gesture of a hand. Never just random mottling. Invariably, it felt like an attempt at representation. Lingering too long on these forms induced a profound disquiet, the unnerving certainty of not being alone. A familiar weight settled on my chest, demanding conscious effort to calm my breathing. Turning on the light remained my instant exorcism, but darkness and moisture were patient collaborators, always resurrecting the forms. They shunned bright illumination, favoring the hallway's faint spill or the fragile gray light of dawn filtering through the frosted window pane. One night, sleep proved elusive. Lying rigid in bed, I listened to the apartment's profound silence, broken only by a faint, insistent dripping from the bathroom. Around 3 a.m., I rose and padded towards the sound. The faucet, though shut tight, I checked, wept a single drop every few seconds, a soft metronomic punctuation in the stillness. Tightening the knob further yielded nothing. I stood there, captive to the rhythm. The mildew odor had returned, subtle but pervasive. On the tiles at the tub's far end, new configurations had bloomed. Faces, perhaps 3 or 4, clustered together, indistinct and distorted. Some possessed shadowed depressions like deep-set eyes. Others featured flat, broad patches suggesting slack mouths. I could almost project onto them the silent murmur of argument, though only the faucet's tear punctuated the quiet. Nausea stirred low in my gut. My throat felt like parchment. The urge to flood the room with light warred with a morbid curiosity to witness what might transpire in the gloom. I edged closer, step by cautious step, acutely aware of my own sound. The mold scent grew heavier, cloying. Then I perceived it, a subtle flux, as if the moisture patterns themselves were subtly reconfiguring. The shapes seemed to pulse with the room's microclimate, edges darkening and fading as though an unseen hand stroked them from within the wall. My jaw clenched. Beads of sweat prickled my forehead. Reaching out a single finger, I made contact. The tile was wet, but the water felt wrong, viscous, almost slimy. I snatched my finger back, raising it to my nose. Mildew, potent and raw. A nervous flutter agitated my stomach. My hand found the switch. Light flared, obliterating the unsettling tableau. The tiles gleamed innocuously, stippled with ordinary water droplets. I plunged the room back into darkness. The patterns did not immediately reappear. I waited a full minute, watching, holding my breath. Nothing. Rinsing my contaminated finger under the now silent tap, I returned to bed, a knot of frustration and weariness tightening within me. The subsequent days saw further experiments. I tried capturing it on my phone, standing sentinel outside the bathroom door at night, recording the dripping syncopation. The audio was clear, but the video yielded only indecipherable shadows moving in the murk. Leaving a bedroom lamp on with the bathroom door ajar proved ineffective. The phenomena demanded near darkness. Any direct approach with a flashlight, any flick of the main switch, banished them instantly. Yet the smell of mold became a permanent resident, clinging faintly even after vigorous cleaning. Not the stench of decay, but a damp, stagnant odor, the ghost of perpetually wet towels. A constant, low-grade anxiety became my companion. Entering the bathroom meant bracing myself, shoulders instinctively hunching, neck muscles knotting. Breathing felt restricted in that small chamber. Showering became an exercise in vigilance, eyes scanning the tiles, anticipating the inevitable bloom. I found myself deliberately leaving the overhead light off, morbidly compelled to observe. And always, after minutes under the hot spray, the moisture patterns would begin their slow, deliberate crawl. Their positions and forms shifted nightly, yet always hinted at the human. A head and shoulders silhouetted here, the suggestion of reaching limbs there. They lacked overt motion, yet seemed to subtly rearrange themselves during a blink or an averted glance. One evening, mid-shower, I spoke aloud into the steam. "I know you're here," I murmured, feeling utterly absurd, yet desperate for a reaction. The smell instantly thickened. A peculiar pressure seemed to build within the water stream itself, the spray feeling suddenly uneven, as if deflected by an invisible obstruction. I watched, transfixed, as the shower curtain beside me billowed slightly inward, a distinct bulge, like something pressing against it from the other side. With a strangled cry, I ripped the curtain back. Empty space greeted me. The drain gurgled. On the tiles near the faucet, the condensation had resolved into a hazy, partial face. My chest seized. I fumbled for the light, scrambled out, dried off with trembling hands, dressing quickly. The bathroom became a place of dread. Yet, necessity dictated entry. Teeth needed brushing, body needed washing. Each time, a meticulous inspection of the tiles preceded any action. Sometimes the shapes were faint, mere whispers of silhouette. Other times they possessed a clearer definition, shadows implying depth. The smell always waxed and waned. The dripping faucet developed an erratic life of its own, sometimes silent for hours, sometimes weeping relentlessly despite my replacing washers and scrutinizing the visible plumbing. Each drop, amplified in the quiet apartment, felt like a reminder, you are not alone. I tried leaving the window wide open all night, hoping aggressive ventilation would desiccate the space. It helped marginally, but shower steam inevitably reconquered the air, and the shapes reappeared. My cleaning became more desperate. A bleach solution scrubbed until my arms burned and fumes stung my eyes. The mold smell vanished for a day, maybe two, before creeping back. The shapes returned with the first blush of humidity. Touching the grout, I found it crumbly in spots. Water ingress behind the tiles. Something growing within the wall itself. The thought was deeply unsettling, imagining layers of hidden mildew coalescing into these forms as it spread. I swallowed hard, pushing the image away. Showers became brief, utilitarian affairs. I aimed to finish before anything substantial could manifest. Keeping the light on became standard practice, a seemingly effective deterrent. But lapses occurred, forgetting the switch before entering, and I'd catch glimpses. Once, 3 distinct faces clustered near the ceiling, seemingly observed me. Another time, a hand shape materializing near the sink, its damp fingers appearing to curl slightly as I ran the tap. My breath hitched. The light snapped on. It vanished. None of it made sense. I held no truck with the supernatural. This apartment, my home for a year, had no ominous history I knew of. Yet nightly, the bathroom transformed into alien territory. Standing within its confines meant feeling scrutinized. Showering meant sensing a silent, unseen audience that never fully revealed itself. No voices, no direct contact, just an oppressive proximity. The tension became chronic, lodging permanently in my shoulders. Sleep offered little respite, often fractured by phantom dripping sounds or the imagined rustle of the shower curtain. I tried resolute ignorance, lecturing myself about mold, moisture, tricks of light and shadow, but the visceral unease refused to be rationalized away. My hand hesitated, trembled slightly each time it closed around the doorknob. I took to humming loudly, playing music on my phone, anything to fill the charged silence, but the sounds felt thin, swallowed by the small space. The water still dripped. The smell still lingered. The shapes still formed. One more night, I resolved on a direct confrontation. Extinguishing all lights throughout the apartment, I positioned myself in the hallway, peering into the bathroom's absolute darkness, relieved only by the faint urban glow filtering through the small window. The tiles were barely discernible planes. The smell was faint, dormant. I waited, motionless, for perhaps 10 minutes. Then I saw it begin, a dark patch materializing low on the left wall, slowly extending upwards, resolving into the rough outline of a hunched figure. Breathing shallowly through my nose, mouth dry, heart thudding against my ribs, I crept closer. With a fingernail, I tapped the tile softly. The surface felt slick, repellent. The shape seemed to shimmer, disturbed by the contact. I recoiled, waiting. A single soft drip echoed from the faucet. The hairs on my neck prickled. Jaw tight, I forced words out. A low, unsteady whisper. "What do you want?" Silence answered. Yet, I perceived, or imagined I perceived, a tremor in the shape, an intensification, as if striving for clarity. Vague hollows deepened where eyes might be, fixed upon me. I stumbled back, spine hitting the hallway wall. My hand scrabbled for the light switch, found it, flicked it. Obliteration. I killed the light again. The shape did not immediately return. The remainder of that night was spent on the sofa, staring into the darkened landscape of my apartment. The bathroom door was now firmly shut. Still, the faintest trace of mildew teased my nostrils. My stomach remained clenched. Relaxation was impossible. I needed the tense muscles of my neck, finding no relief. Morning brought a new strategy. Maximum exposure. Bathroom door flung open all day, lights blazing, window wide. A small fan whirred on the floor, stirring the air. The smell diminished noticeably. In the flat light of day, the tiles looked utterly mundane. White ceramic, slightly discolored grout, nothing more. I wiped them down with a dry towel before leaving for work, clinging to a fragile hope. Returning that evening, I approached the bathroom with caution. The air felt cleaner. I switched off the overhead light, relying solely on a small hallway lamp. Peering inside, no shapes. I ran the sink tap briefly, watching the water course straight down, leaving no anomalous trails. I took a deep breath, trying to unclench. Perhaps it was over. I decided on a shower before bed. Stripping down, I turned on the hot water, stepped beneath the spray, letting it drum against my shoulders. I remained hyper-alert, scanning my surroundings. Initially, normalcy reigned. Then, at the periphery of one tile, a faint discoloration began to spread, lengthening into a thin streak reminiscent of an arm. My muscles seized reflexively. The mildew scent returned, faint but unmistakable. The shower curtain beside me rustled, a slight, definite tug, as if pulled from the other side. Steam blurred my vision. I forced my breathing to remain steady. Reaching out, I yanked the curtain open. Nothing. Turning back to the wall, the streak now culminated in a blurred face near the arm's origin, the two elements seeming horribly connected. My hands began to shake uncontrollably. My chest felt crushed. I lunged for the light, killed the water, and bolted from the tub, toweling off frantically, averting my gaze from the walls as I dressed. It was undeniable now. This presence, whatever it was, wasn't leaving. I couldn't comprehend it, couldn't combat it. The mold, the moisture, persistently conspired to birth these forms, these faces, these limbs. They offered no sound, no overt action, yet their existence manifested in the dampness, the odor, the unnerving pressure on the curtain, the faucet's nightly tears. I took to sleeping with my bedroom door shut, a towel jammed against the threshold, a futile barrier against the smell, seeking a sliver of sanctuary. Ultimately, I coexist with it. I compartmentalize. My focus shifted to mitigation, keeping the bathroom as arid as possible, bathing under bright light, deliberately not lingering on the tile patterns when darkness prevails. Showers are swift. The exhaust fan runs constantly. The shapes still manifest intermittently, but I've cultivated a practiced indifference. I breathe through the tension, execute my routines with forced efficiency, and retreat. It hasn't ceased. Given sufficient humidity and dimness, I still sense them coalescing on the walls, silent, amorphous, dissolving the instant illumination returns. I've told no one. There is no proof, no rational explanation. I simply accept that something within my bathroom strives for visibility, using condensation and decay as its medium. It cannot dictate my life. Leaving the apartment over this feels like surrender. So I remain. I manage. I watch the walls, keep my hand steady on the light switch, and endure. It is all I can do. A dissonance hummed beneath the surface from the very moment I stepped inside apartment 2B. It presented itself plainly enough. 2 rooms carved from the tired heart of a beading slouching at the terminus of a sleepy street. Walls the color of old parchment, floors of scarred hardwood breathing the faint perfume of aged varnish and captive air. A galley kitchen huddled apologetically. A living space felt constricted. The sole bedroom offered a sliver of window overlooking a rusted fire escape, and barely 4 feet beyond, the impassive brick face of its neighbor. The bathroom, compact and echoing, featured a porcelain throne flushed by a dangling chain. Nothing overtly peculiar, nothing to snag the eye. Yet, the entrance refused sanctuary. That was the crux. The first night, I engaged the deadbolt with deliberate care. Thrice, I tested its resolve, shoulder braced against the wood, twisting the knob until my knuckles whitened, feeling the satisfying thud of metal seating into the frame. For good measure, a brass chain slid across its track. Secure. Tested. Final. Unease prickled beneath my skin. The unfamiliar groans of an old structure, perhaps, as I retreated to bed. Mr. Silas, the man who'd handed over the keys, had mumbled something about the rent being low due to its age. No other warnings were offered. Morning arrived, grey light filtering through the grimy window panes, and the door stood ajar. Not wide, merely an inch or two, a slender invitation revealing the dim hallway beyond. The chain dangled, limp. The deadbolt retracted. I stared, mind scrambling through the fog of sleep. Had I risen in the night? A forgotten errand? No. Memory insisted, sharp and clear. Locked. A knot tightened low in my belly, a weight settling upon my chest. Hesitantly, I approached, peered into the vacant corridor, then pulled the door shut, locked it again, meticulously, dismissed it as a novice error, a quirk of settling in. That was the first day. The second dawn mirrored the first. Annoyance began to curdle into a nascent anxiety. This demanded scrutiny. That evening, I performed the ritual. Lock engaged, chain secured. Then, improvisation. A heavy armchair, dragged and wedged firmly beneath the knob. I documented the arrangement with my phone, the timestamp, a digital witness. Sleep was fitful. Waking around 7, the sight jolted me fully alert. The door, gaping slightly. The chair, nudged aside as if by a polite but insistent guest. The chain, undone. A frantic inventory confirmed nothing was missing. The apartment undisturbed, save for this singular, persistent violation. My phone displayed the photograph, irrefutable proof against self-doubt. I felt the frantic thrum of my pulse in my throat, slickness blooming on my palms. Wiping them on my trousers, I fought for calm. My subsequent conversation with Mr. Silas yielded only frustration. He professed ignorance, claimed the previous tenant had lodged no complaints, insinuated incompetence on my part. I've secured doors my entire life, Mr. Silas. I understand the mechanics. His response was a weary sigh, a vague promise to inspect it himself, a promise that dissolved into the ether. Defiance surged. I would fortify this threshold myself. A trip to the hardware emporium produced a new deadbolt, twin padlocks gleaming under the fluorescent lights, and a chain thick as a dockworker's wrist. The afternoon dissolved in a flurry of screws and metal shavings as I excised the old lock and installed its replacement. I tested the new mechanism relentlessly, the clicks and slides echoing in the small space. They worked flawlessly. That night, technology became my sentinel. An old laptop, positioned near the kitchen entryway, its webcam aimed squarely at the door. Motion detection software stood guard, ready to capture the intruder. Unease, sharp and metallic, accompanied me to bed. I left a small lamp burning in the living room, a pool of weak amber light against the anticipated darkness. Sleep remained elusive. Each creak of the building's ancient plumbing, the muffled cadence of a neighbor's television, the distant sigh of traffic, all amplified, suspect. Time dripped slowly, marked by the glowing digits on my phone. Sometime past midnight, exhaustion finally claimed me. A sound, soft as a sigh, the gentle creak of wood yielding, snapped my eyes open, heart slamming against my ribs like a trapped bird. I slid from bed, the chill of the floorboards shocking my bare feet. Each step toward the living room was measured, deliberate. My mouth felt arid as desert sand. The lamp cast long dancing shadows, illuminating the scene. The door cracked open once more, the new locks hanging impotent and loose, mimicking their predecessors. The chain unfastened. The padlocks rested on the floor, not broken or forced, simply open. My makeshift sentry remained undisturbed. I snatched the laptop, fingers fumbling with the trackpad. The recording offered no solace. One frame showed the door, secured and still. The very next frame, open. No blur of motion, no figure crossing the threshold, no audible footsteps. A clean, inexplicable jump cut. I replayed it, leaning close, scrutinizing every pixel. Nothing. The door simply willed itself open. My hand trembled as I re-secured the formidable new deadbolt. Breathing felt shallow, difficult. My throat constricted. Rationality warred with the evidence before me. I'd never countenanced the supernatural. Not then, not now. Yet, explanation remained stubbornly out of reach. Resolve hardened within me. I would stand vigil. Settling into the armchair, I fixed my gaze upon the door, waiting for the dawn. Nothing further disturbed the silence that night. Daylight brought inquiries. My neighbors, mostly older residents, settled deep into the building's rhythms, offered little insight. Trouble with their doors, a chorus of negatives. One man, shoulders slumped in perpetual indifference, muttered about the building's age, warped frames, misaligned locks. Explanations I knew were false, having installed the hardware myself. Another neighbor regarded me with thinly veiled annoyance, claiming silence always reigned from my apartment. Mr. Finch, the building manager, occupied a cramped, dust-laden office on the ground floor. His face was etched with fatigue. He listened, skepticism clear in his weary eyes, but agreed to investigate. Upstairs, he manipulated the locks, pronounced them functional. Perhaps someone possesses a duplicate key, he offered, proposing a new doorknob. I agreed readily. We replaced it together, the old knob tossed unceremoniously into a hallway bin. He handed me the sole set of keys. No copies existed now. That evening, my surveillance escalated. One camera inside, trained on the door, another positioned discreetly in the hallway, observing the exterior. Mr. Silas's potential ire seemed a paltry concern compared to the gnawing need for answers. Both cameras fed into the laptop, set to record continuously. Then, the locking ritual, imbued now with a sense of desperate futility. The new deadbolt, the heavy chain, the gleaming padlocks. The cold, solid weight of the metal felt reassuring, yet utterly unconvincing. I took up my post in the armchair again, a baseball bat, unearthed from some forgotten storage box, resting heavy across my lap. Sweat beaded on my forehead, wiped away with the back of my hand. The apartment hummed faintly. The refrigerators drone, the distant city breathing outside the window. On the laptop screen, twin perspectives unfolded. The empty, dimly lit corridor, the silent, secure door of my apartment. Hours crawled by. My spine ached. My legs grew numb. The urge to succumb to sleep was a physical weight, yet I resisted, forcing wakefulness. Sips of water, dry crackers from the kitchen, meager sustenance for the long watch. The air grew colder, the heater's efforts seeming feeble against the encroaching chill. Around 2 a.m, a sound pricked the silence, faint, almost subliminal, a soft click, like tumblers yielding. My gaze snapped to the door, motionless. The laptop screen confirmed, hallway vacant, door still. I leaned forward, knuckles white on the bat's handle, breathing shallowly through my mouth. And then, it happened. The door eased inward, perhaps an inch, then 2, emitting the faintest groan. I watched, paralyzed, as the chain slid free from its track, as the padlocks tumbled sequentially to the floor with muffled thuds. I saw the deadbolt's thumb turn, rotate, smoothly, deliberately, under no visible hand. I was mere feet away, a direct witness. My heart hammered with painful intensity. A bitter, metallic taste flooded my mouth. Pressure constricted my chest, stealing breath. My hands shook violently. Attempting to rise, bat clutched tight. My knees buckled. The laptop feeds mirrored the impossible reality. The empty hallway outside, the door inside, opening as if by unseen force. No one was there. Pulse roaring in my ears, I extended the bat, nudging the door wider. It swung inward silently, revealing the vacant corridor under the weak glow of the hall lights. Stepping into the doorway, I scanned left, right, empty. Faded wallpaper, antiquated fixtures, nothing more. I examined the hinges, intact, the floor beneath, level. I pulled the door shut. It closed smoothly. Locked it again, slid the chain home, stepped back, bat still held ready. My heart refused to slow. For another hour, I watched. The door remained closed. Eventually slumped in the chair. Oblivion overtook me. I awoke to a cricked neck, the bat still clutched in my hand. Sunlight streamed in. The door stood closed. But every lock, the deadbolt, the chain, the padlocks, was disengaged. The following day became a slow-motion nightmare of reviewing footage. Frame by painstaking frame, I watched the chain fly back, the padlocks click open, the deadbolt turn, all without human agency. The exterior camera provided absolute confirmation. The hallway remained utterly empty throughout the entire event. Proof existed, tangible and digital, but what power did it hold? Mr. Silas, reached by phone, remained impervious. My offer to show him the video was met with weary dismissal. No time. Break the lease if I must. Forfeit the deposit. His patience had clearly evaporated. A call to my friend Leo yielded predictable advice. Get out, Elias. Just leave. The logic was sound, yet funds were scarce. The apartment's primary virtue was its affordability, and deeper still, a stubborn refusal to accept the inexplicable gnawed at me. I craved understanding. Another strategy: remove the chain and padlocks entirely. Replace them with a sturdy latch, augmented by a sliding bolt screwed directly into the doorframe. Tested, secure. Cameras deployed. Sleep, when it came, was shallow. I woke hours later to that familiar sickening creak. Rushing to the door, I found it ajar. The new latch lay on the floor. The sliding bolt retracted. Nausea churned in my stomach. A cold, clammy dread. Locking it again felt like a meaningless gesture, a ritual stripped of all faith. The subsequent night found me huddled on the floor directly before the door, flashlight in one hand, a crowbar, a desperate, illogical acquisition in the other, ear pressed against the wood, straining for any clue. Only the building's ambient sighs answered, a distant pipe rattle, the low hum of the city. Whispered reassurances to myself felt hollow. No forced entry, no marks, no damage, just locks that surrendered their purpose. Defeated, I retreated. Belongings were hastily shoved into the bedroom. I locked myself inside, wedging a dresser against the flimsy interior door. Perched on the edge of the bed, I waited. Sometime in the pre-dawn hours, I heard the distinct sound of the front door opening. I didn't investigate. I simply sat, knees drawn to my chest, breathing deliberately, fighting waves of panic. My heart raced, palms slick with sweat. Morning revealed the inevitable. The front door open, the hallway empty. I closed it, not bothering with the locks. The point had long since evaporated. A locksmith arrived, summoned in a final act of depleted hope. He examined everything, pronounced the existing hardware sound, installed yet another lock, premium quality, his confidence a stark contrast to my own hollow dread. The hefty fee felt like throwing money into a void. That night, the door opened. I watched it happen, unsurprised. The locksmith's expertise was utterly irrelevant. Acceptance settled, cold and heavy. This force, whatever its nature, could not be fought nor understood. A towel stuffed beneath the door was contemptuously tossed aside by morning. A chair wedged under the knob met the same fate. Stacked boxes became mere obstacles, easily displaced. Nothing held. The door would always open. Sleep became a fragmented memory. Fatigue settled deep in my bones, leaching color from the world. Appetite vanished. Every quiet moment was infiltrated by the thought of that door, the creeping dread that perhaps something did enter, though no evidence ever appeared. Nothing stolen, nothing disturbed beyond the lock itself. Brief vigils in the hallway yielded nothing. The phenomenon occurred only when I was inside, vulnerable, distracted. The end was inevitable. I moved out. Packing was a tense affair, punctuated by constant glances over my shoulder at the defiant door. On the final night, I slept fully clothed, leaving the door unlocked. Why pretend? One camera remained, recording the emptiness, destined to capture the same inexplicable event. A door drifting open into silence. Morning. Boxes carried downstairs. A brief encounter with Mr. Finch, whose bored shrug spoke volumes. Then, the street. The cool air, a welcome shock. I started walking, directionless, propelled only by the need for distance. Behind me, in the quiet dimness of apartment 2B, I could vividly picture the door easing open once more, unattended, unexplained. A shiver traced its icy path down my spine as I rounded the corner, resolutely refusing to look back. Answers were a luxury I could no longer afford. Escape was the only currency that mattered now.